Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, based on where you are. Welcome to this workshop in JHTM, Journal of Hospitality, Tourism and Tourism Management Research Symposium. In this workshop, we will talk about theoretical and conceptual framework. So let me share my slide. Hope you can see my slide. Actually, during my presentation, you can stop me and ask your question, and you don't need to wait until end if you have any immediate question and you want to ask. So the topic of this session, this workshop, actually is theoretical and conceptual framework. What's the meaning of theoretical and conceptual framework? And I'm Dr. Mostafa Rasoolimanesh. A bit of introduction of myself. I'm associate professor at Taylor's University and director of Center for Research and Innovation in Tourism and head of research for the Faculty of Social Science and Leisure Management. My area of interest is sustainable tourism, heritage tourism, and some areas related to sustainability. I also use advanced quantitative analysis, and I have a few methodological papers. I published more than 120 articles in referred journals, including including Tourism Management, Journal of Travel Research, Journal of Sustainable Tourism, and Journal of International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management, and a few more. I'm at the moment editorial board of about 20 tourism and hospitality journals, and I serve actually as associate editor of Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management that we have this research symposium from yesterday. Okay, let me go through the definition of theory and discuss a bit about theoretical and then conceptual framework. I believe these two concepts can be considered one of the most confusing concepts, especially in social science discipline. In science is not very critical because the understanding of theory and application of theory in science discipline actually is different with social science, and in social science more critical. Let's look at the meaning and the very, very brief definition of theory. Actually, the theory, the definition goes back to the meaning and the word of theor that refer to or means a spectator. So someone that travel to site and to find new concept and new things to understand the things around. So if we look at this concept, theory can show us can help us to understand the social phenomena and social concept. Also, the another root of this, another root of theory, come from theorem, that is this refer to principle and logic and the assumption behind social phenomena, right? Here we have some component or some definition of theory Theory actually help us to describe and explain and predict social phenomena, right? And also help us to explain reality in sequential order. Means we can, based on theory, understand if something happened, what will be the consequence of these phenomena. So theory refer to relationship between different social phenomena. Also, we can say theory is a set of logical statements about a phenomena within a set of boundary assumption, and theory can explain underlying psychological, economic, and social dynamic behind the relationship between phenomena or behind some social phenomena. So theory refers to those logic and understanding of social phenomena and relationship between social phenomena. So based on this, theory is not a literature review. Sometimes when we talk about theory and ask about theory, someone referred to a review of literature and previous empirical studies and say, okay, when you ask about theory behind this social phenomena or relationship between these two concepts, we have these previous studies, and those previous studies investigated this concept. Actually, it's not theory. Theory is the logic can explain social phenomena or relationship between different concepts. So theory is not simply references or literature. Also, theory is not data. Theory is not variables and concepts that we have in our studies, right? Theory is not hypothesis that we have in our quantitative research. Theory is not this concept, but all these concepts can be linked to theory, right? For example, hypothesis always should be supported by theory, but all hypothesis is not theory. Prediction can happen based on theory, but prediction alone is not theory, right? Or some variables, some concept and construct can come from theory, can be extracted from theory, but they are not representing theory, right? So we have to be mindful, and we need to understand the meaning of theory in our research. Actually, theory can consider as a blueprint that explain the structure and relationship between different phenomena and between different concepts. Here I have some examples of some dominant and common theories in social science and also in tourism and hospitality. Here you can see the list of some theories. For example, social exchange theory. Social exchange theory is a theory that explain exchange between two groups of people. If you are familiar with the resident perception concept and doing some study on resident perception, you can see social exchange theory is one of the dominant theory in this area, and this theory has been used to explain why exchange between tourists and resident happen. For resident perception study, the social exchange theory is applied to understand the reason and logic for exchange between tourists and residents, or in other words, support of tourism by local community and residents. So this social exchange theory explained that if in the perception of people, benefit of some activities is more than cost of those activities, people are willing to support that activity or willing to exchange with the other group related to that activity. So this is the reason that we apply social exchange theory to understand perception of resident and support for tourism development. So if residents believe benefit of tourism development in their community is more than cost, so they are willing to support tourism development and interact with tourists visiting their community and their destination. So when we apply social exchange theory, the principle of social exchange theory is this exchange between two groups and exchange between benefit and cost. So social exchange theory can explain, can justify this situation, can explain psychological reason for supporting tourism development or exchange between resident and tourists. Another theory is very, very mature theory that I'm sure those who work on behavioral science, you heard about this theory, and if you are working on behavioral science, most of you already apply this theory. It's theory of planned behavior. Theory of planned behavior developed in 1970s and explained how we behave and how our behavioral intention is formed, and then behavioral intention how lead to actual behavior, right? So for theory of planned behavior, there are three components that influence our behavioral intention and actual behavior. Attitude, subjective norm, and perceived control. These three concepts influence our behavioral intention. For example, if we are doing a study about selection of a green hotel or staying in green hotel by hotel guests, by tourists, so we study their attitude toward environmental protection, for example, or their green attitude, and then subjective norm, what the other people actually they think about this concept, and perceived control that they have over this process. And these three factors shape their behavioral intention. So if they have attitude and high level of subjective norm and perceived control, so most probably these people have high intention to stay in green hotel, right? So this is principle of theory of planned behavior, right? So based on this relationship in many studies, we apply this theory to explain and to justify how intention of people shape and how people behave in different situations. So this is theory of planned behavior. Okay, this is another example of a theory that in many of behavioral studies in different social science disciplines, including tourism and hospitality, have been used. But a theory can be changed during the time. At the moment, there are many critics about this theory of planned behavior, and especially if you are familiar with theory of planned behavior, you know, we have 3 layers for theory of planned behavior. First layer is the factor that I mentioned, and based on this theory, these factors influence behavioral intention. So behavioral intention is second layer, but third layer is actual behavior. So one of the main critiques about theory of planned behavior is behavioral intention and actual behavior cannot happen in same time. So especially if we apply this theory and we collect data for our research using questionnaire, and we want to collect data for both concept, behavioral intention and actual behavior. So it's not possible, because when we talk about behavioral intention, it means something will happen in the future. How actual behavior can happen at the same time? This is one main critique for theory of planned behavior. Another thing, you may hear that in tourism, we have a big gap. We have a big attitude behavior gap. Many studies recently have been conducted and show this result that even those people with positive attitude toward the environmental protection, for example, so when those people go to actual action, we can see a big gap between these two concepts, and necessarily positive attitude doesn't lead to positive behavior and pro-environmental behavior in sustainable tourism concept, for example, right? But theory of planned behavior is an example. All behavioral theories are example of these type of theories that can explain behavior of people, how behavior of people can shape. Another example is technology acceptance model. If you are working with the technology, you apply this theory, technology acceptance model, or TAM. We say acceptance of technology, adoption of technology can happen if user believe on usefulness and ease of use of that technology. So usefulness and ease of use influence acceptance of technology. So when we talk about acceptance of technology, psychological reason for accepting technology come from 2 main components and 2 concepts: ease of use and usefulness. So we call this theory. Why? Because explain acceptance behavior of users, acceptance behavior of our respondent, and acceptance depends on these 2 main factors. So we call this theory, right? Or unified the theory of acceptance and use of technology, UTAT theory. Again, this theory refer to technology adoption and the technology acceptance. If this theory has been developed in 2003 by Professor Venkatesh and his colleague by combining 8 different theories in behavioral science, including theory of planned behavior and technology acceptance model. So they combine 8 theories and develop a new theory called UTAT. Using this UTAT, we can see effect of several factors on adoption and acceptance of technology. So after developing this theory by Prof. Venkatesh and his colleague, we can see using this theory in many different studies in different disciplines. Recently, I checked actually citation of this paper, and citation means those studies that refer to this theory and apply this theory in their work is, I think, should be more than 50,000. So it means this theory has been used in many different disciplines that work on acceptance of technology or adoption of technology. So behavior of people for adopting technology. So this is another example of theory. We have many different theories, stakeholder theory here and many other theories. So theory is something that can explain logic behind social phenomena, right? So from this point, we go to explaining theoretical framework. What's theoretical framework for our study? Theoretical framework refer to theory or theories, more than one theory if we have, that we apply in our study. If we combine theory of planned behavior and the technology acceptance model in our study to support our hypothesis, and then I will explain in a short while to support our conceptual framework. So our theoretical framework is combination of technology acceptance model and theory of planned behavior. If we apply social exchange theory and Weber theory, for example, to justify resident perception and factor influencing resident perception, so your theoretical framework is combination of social exchange theory and the theory of and the Weber theory. So theoretical framework refer to theories that you apply to support your study, right? But what's conceptual framework? Conceptual framework refer to the concept that you adopted to address your research question in your study. So this concept can come from different theories. When you combine theory of planned behavior and theory of technology acceptance model, two concepts can come from technology acceptance model, and three concepts, attitude, subjective norm, and perceived control, can come from theory of planned behavior. You combine these five concepts influencing behavioral intention in your study. And these concept relationship between these concepts and the hypotheses that come from this relationship create your conceptual framework. So conceptual framework is from your study and linked to your research question. But theoretical framework is theory or theories that support relationship between those concepts that have been applied, have been used in your study. So theoretical framework support conceptual framework, support conceptualization of your study, conceptualization of your relationship between concepts in your study linked to research question and objective, right? So theoretical framework refer to existing theories. And from existing theories, you can extract different concepts, combine those concepts, and establish your research model and your study framework. Your research model, your study framework, combination of different concepts that come from different theory is your conceptual framework, right? So when you have your conceptual framework, the relationship between different concepts should be explained by, should be justified by your theoretical framework. So your theory that you apply in your study need to explain why these concepts are related in your conceptual framework. So, okay. So here we can see this link between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. So theoretical framework come from theory, but not only one theory, can come from more than one theory, but theory establish, create your theoretical framework, but different concept from applied theory can create your conceptual framework. So conceptual framework is supported by theoretical framework, and theoretical framework come from your theory. If we combine a few theories, all concepts can come from different theories. So two concepts come from theory, technology acceptance model. Three concepts can come from theory of planned behavior. But we have other situations as well, right? Sometimes, especially when we apply mixed method, we realize that theoretical framework is not sufficient. Existing theory actually are not sufficient to support our conceptual framework. And we need to explore a few more concepts. In this situation, you apply, yesterday, Prof. Emily Ma explained about the different mixed method approach. And one of the mixed method design is sequential exploratory. In sequential exploratory, we conduct a qualitative phase and identify a few new concepts. Those new concepts can be added to our conceptual framework. And then this new and developed conceptual framework that come from existing theory and qualitative phase can be tested using quantitative phase, right? So in this case, your theoretical framework support part of your conceptual framework, but a few new concepts have been added to your conceptual framework based on qualitative phase, right? So conceptual framework come from your study, but theoretical framework comes from existing theory, right? So we need to differentiate between these two concepts. Here I have some example of my publication, my papers, to show how we can differentiate between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. But before going to paper, there is an important statement for quantitative research, especially when we develop a conceptual framework. The role of theory and the role of theoretical framework is very critical and important. Actually, the quantitative research in social science most of time follow deductive reasoning. And in deductive reasoning, we actually the main principle of deductive reasoning is to move from theory to data. So starting point of quantitative research is theory, and you need to conceptualize your study and your framework based on an established theory or established theoretical framework. So the role of theory and theoretical framework to conceptualize quantitative research is very critical and important. And we can say quantitative research is very theory-driven, right? So it's different with qualitative. Qualitative most of the time follow inductive reasoning. And for inductive reasoning, it's not necessary to have theoretical, strong theoretical ground. Theory in qualitative research can be considered as an umbrella for actually establish our research, but is not necessary to have strong theoretical ground, because in inductive reasoning, the final outcome of research should be or can be theory development. And this is different with the deductive reasoning that we follow in quantitative research. So the role of theoretical framework is very critical and important in quantitative research, and we have to be very careful and mindful about theoretical framework if we follow and if we apply quantitative research. Here are some examples of from my papers. Here is a paper that we work on community participation in World Heritage Site and community participation of local community members for heritage conservation and also tourism development. We published this paper in 2017. Here, if you look at the abstract of this paper, we explained about MOA model or theory. So here we explain this study investigate factor contributing to community participation in World Heritage Site using MOA model, motivation, opportunity, ability model. This model explains how community participation happens and actually explain the logic behind forming community participation. Based on this story, we can see motivation of people and also opportunity that they have for participation, and their ability and capacity for participation are three main factors that influence effective participation. So we apply this theory to conceptualize relationship between some factors. First, to identify some factors, and then conceptualize the relationship between those factors and the community participation. Here in the paper, we explain about this theory or this model, and here we have some hypotheses and some concepts that we apply in this study. We have three levels of participation: high level, medium, and low level of participation. That there are different definitions in this paper. You can, if you are interested to know about these three levels of participation, you can read this paper. And here there are 6 factors. 3 of them, positive perception, negative perception, and interest, are categorized under motivation, opportunity, and under ability. We have 2 factors, knowledge and awareness, that influence different levels of community participation, right? So here we have 18 hypotheses in this study, but all hypotheses and this conceptual framework has been supported by MOA model or MOA theory. So in this study, MOA is theoretical framework, and this is conceptual framework of this study. Conceptual framework shows relationship between 6 different factors and 3 levels of community participation. But all these relationship and hypotheses supported by MOA, principles of MOA model or theory. So here you can see the difference between the theoretical framework in this study and conceptual framework. in quantitative research, when we have hypotheses, each hypothesis should be supported by theoretical framework and also previous empirical study. So we need to have two different wings, and we need to support our hypothesis in quantitative research from two different angles. First, by our theoretical framework, and then by literature and previous empirical studies. Previous empirical studies and literature cannot replace theoretical framework. So theoretical framework to support your hypothesis is a must. And your hypothesis together can establish conceptual framework. So conceptual framework is relationship between concept in your study, but all these relationships are supported by your theoretical framework and the theory that you apply in your study. This is another paper. This paper actually investigate relationship between motivation, knowledge, and perceived power on resident perception. In this paper, we applied Weber theory of formal and substantive rationality. So based on this theory, we explain how motivation, knowledge, and perceived power influence resident perception. So here we explain about this theory, and this is our framework, conceptual framework. So conceptual framework here is relationship between motivation, perceived power, knowledge, and economic gain on positive and negative perception and support for tourism development. Each hypothesis in this conceptual framework and the relationship should be justified based on Weber theory, and we try to justify based on Weber theory. There is an important point when we apply theory and theoretical framework. We have two types of, in general, we can categorize theories under two main categories. Some theories, like theory of planned behavior, or technology acceptance model, or UTAT, you have very structured theory. So in this type of theories, you can see exactly specific factors that influence some other factors. Theory of planned behavior, you have subjective norm, attitude, and perceived control influence behavioral intention. Technology acceptance model, you have perceived usefulness and the ease of use influence acceptance, right? So this type of theory, you have, and the factor influencing some other factor are very specific. You cannot add or change those factors. If you want to apply this theory, this can support relationship between attitude and behavioral intention if you apply TPP, right? If you want to add more factors, actually based on this theory is not possible. You need to add another theory, or you need to develop your conceptual model and add more factors based on qualitative research, right? But also we have some theories that are not very structured. We can call those theories unstructured theories, like Weber theory here, right? Weber theory here, there is a logic under this theory that explain our behavior follow two types of rationality: substantial rationality and also formal rationality. Formal rationality refers to economic benefit, but substantial rationality refer to value-driven rationality. So both factors influence our behavior and our decision, and also our perception. So we apply this theory to explain effect of this 4 factor on perception here. Also, this can be applied for other factors. Maybe in another study, you find a totally different factor influence on behavior or perception, but still use Weber theory, because Weber theory provides some main justification for relationship between social phenomena. As long as you can justify relationship based on these principles, you can apply this theory. Another example of this unstructured theory is social exchange theory. Social exchange theory, as I explained, if benefit is more than cost, exchange can happen. Support of tourism can happen, right? So you can see different resident perception study applies social exchange theory, and factors influencing perception or support for tourism development can be totally different. But still, they applied social exchange theory to support this relationship, right? Why? Because social exchange theory is an unstructured theory. There is some principles, so you can apply those principles to justify relationship between some factors. So we need to understand and differentiate between these 2 main types of theories. This is another example. It's a paper that we publish in the Journal of Travel Research. And in this paper, we discuss mediating role of resident perception. You know, for assessment of mediation, we have some factor influence mediator and the mediator influence dependent variable, for example. Here we had some factors, community attachment, environmental attitude, cultural attitude, economic gain, and involvement that influence perception, and perception influence support for tourism development, right? So in this study, the research question was to investigate mediation role of resident perception. So we need to justify these 2 layers, independent variable on resident perception and resident perception on support, right? In this study, we discussed that one theory cannot justify both relationships. So we decided to apply social exchange theory for one layer and Weber theory for another layer to justify these 2 relationships and justify mediation role of resident perception, so indirect effect of IV on DV. So here we apply these 2 theories. These 2 theories establish theoretical framework of this study. And our conceptual framework is the concept that we have in this study. In another study, we can apply again these 2 theories, but add the different variables as IV, because these 2 theories are can be considered unstructured theory, as long as the principles of those theories can support the relationship. We can apply those theories, right? But the factors can be different for this type of theory. So theoretical framework is the combination of these 2 theories, and conceptual framework is a relationship between concept and your hypothesis that we develop in our study. I try to very quick go through these 2 concepts and show some example to clarify the meaning of these 2 concepts that are very critical, especially for quantitative research. Okay, thank you. Now we can go for a few questions if you have any question? Okay. Here I cannot see a question in chat box. So if you have any question, please unmute your mic and ask your question. Don't be shy, so we can share our experience if you. Okay. I have a question concerning the application of theories. For instance, the emotional solidarity theory has been widely applied in examining resident attitude and reaction toward tourism in tourism setting. But recently I read an article discussing how emotional solidarity mediate the effect of authenticity, perception, or support for supportive attitude toward tourism development from the perspective of tourists. Therefore, my question is whether the existing theoretical framework is fixed in a certain direction. No, of course, no. Or specific perspective could be adopted based on study needs. Based on your research question, you can apply theories. So there is no fixed, especially for unstructured theory, like emotional solidarity theory that here you mentioned, or social exchange theory, or stakeholder theory. There is no fixed variable and concept, and there is no fixed position for theory. You need to understand the principles of theory, and then you can apply based on your research question, what your research question needs. The example that I show you, okay, let me share again. Here, in this study, we apply social exchange theory and Weber theory to investigate mediating role of resident perception, right? No previous study focused on this mediation role. In some study, actually, this has been reported, but not as a main research question and objective of study. But based on the component of these two theories, we try to explain how this component can help us to justify relationship between IVs and resident perception, and also resident perception, effect of resident perception on support for tourism development. So this is not fixed that always Weber theory should be used for relationship between a specific IV and DV, right? Or specific IV and mediator. We need to see how component of those theory can be applied and can justify relationship that we have in our study, and also a link to our research question. So the answer is not fixed.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, no problem. While working with new construct like IR 4.0, emotional intelligence, or if you're going to find direct theory, then what's your suggestion? Okay, if you are not able to find the theory, again, you have to be very careful when you say you cannot find direct theory. Theory doesn't mean that you need to find a structured theory with fixed independent variable and dependent variable, right? Many of theories don't have fixed concept. Only they explain some component and principles, right? Okay, so you have to be very careful about this. But even by considering the unstructured nature of several theories, still you cannot find any theory to support your study, you have to follow inductive reasoning and qualitative method. It's not possible to adopt quantitative method without supporting from theoretical framework and established theory. So in this case, the solution can be applying qualitative research and inductive reasoning. Hope I answer your question. Okay. Okay. Any other question? Any question? If you have any question, you can unmute and ask your question, or you can write in chat box. Okay, so it means there is no more question. Okay, the recorded video of this session will be sent to all participants and also will be available in my YouTube channel. And if you want to rewatch this recorded video, you can go to my YouTube channel and rewatch. And also you will receive from organizer, this is symposium organizer. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for attending this session. Hopefully in this short time, I could provide some useful information and tips to understand the conceptual framework and theoretical framework and differentiate between these two concepts. Thank you very much.